Those in favor? Those opposed? Carried. The minutes of the council meeting of April the 1st. Are there any errors or omissions in those minutes? Steve?
I'll move the minutes of April 1st, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. I'll call a question. Those in favor? Those opposed? Carried. Thank you. Let's move down to Public Works Policy, G1. Public Works Policy Review and Recommendations.
Good morning, Council, Mr. Chairman.
Morning.
So this morning I'm here to talk about Public Works Policy Review and Recommendations. On an ongoing basis, administration has been reviewing existing policies that exist for the county and eliminating or updating. I do have quite a few still left to be updated. These ones are primarily eliminations of duplication policies or policies that aren't necessarily being used. So as far as previous council direction, the majority of these policies haven't been updated in 10 plus years, and some originate back from the 1980s. The majority were put in place to accommodate or speak to a specific item. With new policies being brought to council, we have included portions of these policies that further enhance or replace the existing ones. For example, there'll be a reference here later to road use agreements, and there is a duplication within a more robust policy that we essentially have adopted. So I attached all of the existing policies that I do have on this list today, and there are 6. The first one is Policy 300, which is construction projects within county boundaries. It was adopted in 1984 and revised in April 2005. Policy 303, road allowance obstructions, was adopted in 1991 and revised in April 2005. 305 is seismic operations permits, which we actually haven't issued one of these in over 10 years. And that was adopted in 1983 and revised in April 2005. Now, for the seismic operations permit, there is in our schedule of fees, it does have a permit for that. Not sure why it was adopted as a policy, but it was done. Policy 307, salt management plan, was adopted in 2010. The federal government, and I remember this because I spoke with the federal government at that time, they were going around to all municipalities requesting them to put salt management plans in place and they had moved west essentially after doing this in Ontario. The majority of the salt management from the federal government was directed at pure straight road salt users, which is primarily what they do in Ontario. They just put straight road salt. We do a blended mix, which ours is 95% sand, 5% salt. So we don't have a requirement to actually have a salt containment pond because there is no runoff of significant amount of salt that will do any environmental damage. Policy 330, surface materials lease, was adopted in 1980 and revised in June 2012. Policy 343 and 344 are both in relation to vegetation management, roadside weed control, and these are actually duplicated, and there are existing ASB policies, 609 and 626, which basically reiterate the exact same thing. So at the time, there must have been some duplication. I know there was some crossover between Public Works and Ag Service Board back in the early 2000s, and that's probably why there is a duplication essentially of those. Some of the alternatives I looked at as far as this goes, policy revision review is an ongoing process, and as previous policies become amalgamated to other existing policies, duplicate policies can therefore be then eliminated. policy review has involved an overall review of the county's policies, and there are quite a few that we have within all the different departments. And for all the operations departments that I oversee, there is, I wouldn't say 100, but there is probably getting close to that many, but we're starting to see that number decrease substantially. As far as the financial impact, all recommended policies that are to be rescinded had no previous financial implications outside of the road permitting costs, which are assumed within policy 352, which requires deposits for road use agreements. And just moving back to my summary, all of these documents have been reviewed and compared versus other existing policies that we have within the county. And my recommendation is to rescind the ones that are listed there, 300, 303, 305, 307, and 330. And policies 343 and 344, which I said are duplicated by ASB policies 609 and 626, which is the department that they are actually fall within the operations portion of.
Thank you. Any questions? I do have one, Jeremy.
Yep.
You said the policy 300 had been replaced by, or enhanced by 352. Does 352 have a correction in the way it was worded? I'm just kind of looking at this, and I kind of like the contractor to make his own arrangements, and he will. I hope those words have kind of disappeared from the new policy. Have they?
I would have to take a look at that one specifically on that wording portion. Typically for all contract or all contractors, we enter into an agreement with them as part of that contract agreement, which would supersede lots of these policies in the first place. And that is by best practice guidelines. Devin can probably touch more on that contractor commitment, what we have essentially for those contracts.
Yeah, I'm not necessarily meaning in that context. I'm meaning it the way it was written in the his and he, more of a neutral base rather than a gender base.
Oh, okay.
That's all I was meaning.
Yeah. No, fair. The one thing is the road use agreement, policy 352, that is one that I'm going to be going through to make sure that I clean up some of the details within that as well. And if there are those subjective wording pieces, I will correct those at that time.
Okay.
I'm slowly breaking down what policies are duplication and which ones are already basically represented by something else that's a stronger, better policy. Like the road use agreement is a good policy, and then I'm going to be going through those existing policies and correcting pieces within there as well to make sure that they're current and make sure things like that, like subjective wording and whatnot, is addressed.
Okay, any other questions? Steve?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Policy 303, the road allowance obstructions, is it a duplicate? Or how would we go about taking care of the things about haystacks or bins in the right-of-way?
Those are all referenced within the Municipal Government Act. We have, the municipality has direct operations and controls of essentially the road allowance, and it's not necessarily that we need a policy essentially to have that in place, because it's already written into legislation that all obstructions have to be removed from road allowance, and then we could use our community peace officer essentially to enforce what those are.
Okay.
Yep.
It's more of a public safety thing through the MDA then?
Exactly, yep. And as a municipality, even though we have the direct control over the roadways, we are restricted as far as what can actually be placed within any road allowance. So for the one overriding piece, I guess, is utility operations, but because utilities are considered public facility, those are allowed to be placed in a road allowances as the only type of obstruction.
Okay.
Yep.
Any other questions? Seeing not, we could use the motion then. Ken? To rescind the recommended policies?
To rescind existing policy 300, updated and enhanced by policy FI2 road use, 303 within MDA, and 305 permitting, 307 not required, 3030 gravel pits are legislated through the ADG to rescind policies 343 and 344 as they are duplication to the existing ASB 609 and 626 policies.
Any discussion? Call for the question. Those in favor? Those opposed? Carried. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Council. Thank you for your questions, too.
Let's do bylaw 21-007, Shaughnessy Infrastructure Phase 3.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Devin and I are going to present this jointly as it has both a infrastructure and financial component related to it. In 2019, within the capital project or capital budget, there's a project identified for the Shaughnessy Infrastructure Phase 3 upgrades. The amount at the time for the budget was $650,000, which was approved. The actual cost came in when the project was complete in 2020 of $571,260, which included a local improvement levy piece to the funding of the project. The total local improvement levy after final costs will be $16,480, which will be applied to all of the benefiting parcels as a one-time payment only. The details are included in the attached bylaw. There were no valid petitions received from the local improvement plan when administration notified all of the residents that were affected by this levy. Administration is recommending that council approve all three readings of the proposed bylaw as presented. Council does have the option of not passing the bylaw. The funds were pulled from the utility reserve in the meantime to fund this, so any collection of these tax levies will go back to that reserve. So there would be an impact to the utility reserve of that $16,000 if the bylaw is not approved. I guess the pro to that would be that the ratepayers would not have to pay their share of the costs. The utility reserve currently has a balance of just over $3.7 million within it. I don't know if you have any questions with regards to the project itself. That's where Devin can assist you.
Yeah, I can kind of refresh everybody of what the local improvement applied to. So the local improvement tax applied to the upgrade of a portion of sanitary sewer main and then various hydrant and valve installations throughout the hamlet. And we originally estimated about $26,000 was going to be the cost, but it came in at about $16,000. That was due to a couple hydrants we couldn't install because we found some 4-inch lines out there when we expected 6-inch, so that brought down the cost a little bit for that portion. So that's why it's at $16,480, which was, I believe, just under $100 per resident out there.
So just when you look at the map, only the people who are directly impacted by the improvement get the additional charge? Is that correct?
The whole hamlet receives a benefit from sewer and water upgrades, so that's why the entire hamlet pays the local improvement.
Not just the people who border where it happened?
Correct.
It's everybody?
That's correct.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
Claude?
Why are we doing this bylaw, or is that normal doing it after the fact? Because a lot of the stuff is all done already, and now we're coming with the bylaw.
Right. So we did come to council previously to introduce the local improvement tax, and we went through the process where the public had a chance to form a petition and submit it. Now that we have the final costs in, we have to create this bylaw based on the actual final costs.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, if this bylaw is approved today as well, it will be included on the 2021 tax levy that will be issued in mid to late May.
Okay. Any other discussion? there's none, we could use first reading if you choose, or we could not do it. Go ahead, Klaus.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll move the local improvement bylaw 21-007, Shaughnessy infrastructure upgrades, for first reading.
Any discussion? Call the question. Those in favor? Those opposed? Carried. Second reading. Ken?
The county passed local improvement bylaw 21007, Shaughnessy infrastructure upgrades.
Any discussion on second reading? Call the question. Those in favor? Those opposed? Carried. And we would need a motion to go to third reading. Bob? Call the question. Those in favor? Opposed? Carried. And third reading. Klaus?
I'll move third reading, bylaw 21007.
Any discussion on third reading? Call the question. Those in favor? Those opposed? Carried. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Let's go down to corporate services. 2021 FCSS funding contribution.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This report is more or less just for council's information. We received the letter that is included in your agenda package from the Barons Eureka Warner Family and Community Support Services, advising that their board met on February 3rd. It should say 2021. There's a typo there. It says 2012. And made a motion that the board would be implementing a 0% increase per capita to the 2021 municipal requisition. Therefore, the county is only required to pay the $7.61 per capita, which is $78,786.33 for 2021, the same as they did in 2020. As council passed their budget in December of 2020, we had budgeted a slight increase, bringing the estimated contribution up to $7.68. So the budget total is $79,490. So it would leave a slight surplus of $700 within that GL portion of the budget. As council is probably aware, Municipal Affairs states that Family and Support Services is an 80-20 funding partnership with the Government of Alberta, who contributes 80%, and participating municipalities and MAD settlements contribute the other 20%. So FCS receives its mandate from the FCS Support Act and regulations, and they base their determine their budgets and then base the funding on that. As mentioned, this is just for information for council purposes.
So just out of curiosity, with the COVID the way it is and the situation as it is, are they able to still perform the majority of their services, or are they somewhat restricted in what they can or can't do?
I haven't spoken with them directly, Mr. Chairman, so I'm not sure.
Bob?
And really, it's gotten busier. Somehow, they're able to do the distancing thing and still give up to them. So, yeah, they haven't lost anybody. And,
Okay.
it's neat.
Any other clause?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just out of curiosity, when did this start that we were contributing to the Barons Eureka? Does anybody know that? It was probably quite a few years ago, I assume. But.
I looked back in the financials just to kind of see what the comparison was, and I looked back to 2011, I think. I'm sure it goes back further than that, though.
It does.
Yeah.
Since I've been on council, we've been contributing it to it, so I can't honestly answer that question. I don't know.
Probably as long as they've been operating, I would assume.
Probably. Ann?
It's just a suggestion, too. We could have Zach do a presentation, because I know he did that a few years ago, And it might be helpful for council for him to come back to an upcoming council meeting and just give an overview on their programs and what they're doing.
Go ahead, Cons.
Yeah, I asked that because it's quite a contribution that we're making toward that, and you know, I'd like to see what's going on and what they're all doing and everything like that. That would be very much appreciated.
Well, if it ever got to the point where you could go to a meeting again, that meeting they used to have in Tabor was extremely informative as to what they did, and they actually had people come up and give examples of how they got helped and how the staff helped people. It's really a good thing to go to if you've never been. Go ahead, Steve.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Didn't we have an update last summer or early fall from them?
You're right, yes, we did. Do you think that you would like to wait, or do you think?
Yeah, I think it was so recent it'd be kind of redundant in
Okay.
my opinion.
We can just send some updates to council then on what they're doing. I know they did some unique, innovative things during the COVID pandemic, so we'll just send you an update, and then if you have any more questions, we can get those answered.
So we don't need to receive this for information?
You can if you like, Mr. Chairman.
Bob?
Make a motion to receive this as information. Maybe have Anna those to figure out updates. Yeah.
Any other questions before we? So we have a motion on the floor to receive for information. I'm going to call the question. Those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you.
Thank you.
Records management. We got time to do this before 10?
Probably, I don't see him. Oh, delegation.
Okay, let's do G 4.1, records, or policy 185, record management, rescind, policy 160. Doug?
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of council. Thank you for having me in today. The first item is Records Management Policy 185. As you know, administration has been reviewing county policies to determine their relevance to current operations. It has been determined that current policy 160 from 2012 is not reflective of today's best practices. Council approved policy 160 back in 2012. The policy was intended to ensure responsible management of county records and record-keeping systems as valuable resources and assets. Part of the background information, back in 2012, there was no policy in place, but one was required in order to make application for the community peace officer position. The policy was utilized from the University of Lethbridge and has not been updated since its original adoption. This past fall, Lethbridge County hired a records management consultant who has done a review of current practices, interviewed staff, and made recommendations moving forward. One of those recommendations is to update both the records management policy and the records management bylaw from 1992. Included with the policy is a classification scheme and a citation table. These will be the guiding documents moving forward for retention and disposal based on legislation, which is relevant to the county. This will be supported by a records management system that all staff will have access to. The alternatives, pros and cons. Council could consider the following when deliberating this decision: to support the recommendation. The current 2012 records management policy has not been updated in almost 10 years and does not have retention and disposal guidelines. Administration has done its due diligence in researching and recommending a records management policy that would support staff and provide clear guidelines with its schedule for retention and disposal. Or to deny the recommendation, policy 160 would remain in effect. The county would not have clearly defined retention and disposal guidelines for effective records management. There is no cost to update the policy. Administration is moving forward with a request for proposal for a records management software program, and that's been approved in the 2021 budget by council. The reasons for the recommendation: Policy 160 is outdated and does not have a retention and disposal schedule that assists staff in making informed decisions regarding county records. Proposed Policy 185 provides both a classification scheme and recommended retention and disposal time, lines based on legal research, and brings the county's records management system into current standing. What we are recommending, Mr. Chairman, is that Policy 160 be rescinded and Policy 185 be adopted. Thank you.
Okay, any questions for Doug? Seeing none, we would require a motion to do so. You need two separate motions? One to rescind and one to adopt? I guess so.
Yes.
Go ahead, Morris.
No, it's okay.
Oh,
I was just going to move to resending it and adopting.
we need to do it in two,
Well, we got to resend first, right?
yeah.
And I'll move that.
Any discussion on that? Call the question. Those in favor? Those opposed? Carried. To approve? Ken? Seeing no discussion, I'll call the question. Those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thanks, Doug. I guess we'll just leave you now, and we'll go over to the audited financial report. Is that okay?
Okay, absolutely, yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll just introduce Phil McFarland with KPMG LLP. He'll be presenting the 2020 financial statements as of December 31st, 2020, following which Councillor Tori Campbell, as a representative of the Audit Committee, will then present the report and recommendation for acceptance of the financial statements.
Morning, everyone.
Morning.
As oh, yeah, that's right, guys. I didn't see you there behind me. There is, yeah. As Jen so kindly introduced, my name is Phil McFarland. I'm a senior manager with KPMG. Mark Deblois is the partner on the engagement. Unfortunately, he had a bit of a family emergency this morning and wasn't able to be here with us today, so he sends his apologies for that. So what we're here to do today is for me to present the 2020 audited financial statements. So that is for your year ended December 31st. And so just to go over that information, and then there'll be a motion put forward to pass those. We have already met with the Audit Committee and went through the financial information with them and brought up our findings specifically. I do believe that you guys have a copy of the draft financial statements in front of you. Those draft financial statements are draft because they're subject to your approval. So just to kind of go through the statements at a high level and take up any questions that you might have. The first thing that I want to chat about is just our audit report. So if you skip into a couple of pages, you'll find our independent auditor's report that covers 3 pages. It is draft dated for today. It is a clear opinion on the financial statements, meaning that the financial statements are reliable and accurate and able to be used by yourselves and your stakeholders, community members, to get an understanding of the assets, liabilities, and operations of the county. So looking at the first statement, this is page 1 of your financial statements. So this is a statement of financial position. This is a reflection of the assets and liabilities of the organization at December 31st. So you can see that there's total financial assets of $40.5 million, very consistent with the prior year of $40.8 million, only some slight variations in the balances there. So those are everything that is cash or will be converted into cash in the next 12 months. Below that, we have your financial liabilities. So your financial liabilities are things that will require cash to be extinguished. So classic example is long-term debt, those sorts of things. We have $24.3 million, just down from this prior year of $27.3. Again, the main real reason for a reduction there is you paid down some long-term debt this last year as you made payments, as well as there was some funding in 2019 that you had received that was utilized in 2020. So that funding was what we call deferred revenue, and it just means that you'd received the money, but it was implied for a restricted purpose, and that you were going to be utilizing it in the next fiscal year. So you did that as you completed some projects. Below that, we have your non-financial assets. So your non-financial assets include tangible capital assets, which are buildings, roads, equipment, those sorts of things. That's $124.4 million, just up from $123.5 million in the previous year. Your prepaid expenses and your inventory for consumption. So your inventory for consumption is fuel, grader blades, gravel, those sorts of things. Overall, we have an accumulated surplus of $142 million. I will talk about that in just a second to break that balance down for you, to make it a little bit more clear on what that all consists of. Moving over onto the statement of operations, we have your revenues and expenses for the year, so where your funding came from and how you utilize that funding in order to provide services for your county members. So we have $25.2 million in total revenue, down from the prior year of $27.3 million. Again, there's a little bit of a reduction in some of your fines, penalties, those sorts of things. And then the biggest piece that reduced was sales and user fees, which again is a large base of different items that come into there. We have total expenses of $26 million, again, fairly consistent with the prior year of $27 million. So we have a deficit before other items of $826,000. So again, you came fairly close to a break even from just an operating perspective. Then once we factor in sort of your capital related items, so you can see that you've got government transfers of $4.4 million in the 2020 year, just up from the previous year of $3.4 million for an overall surplus. So this is the third last line of $3.9 million. So again, at the end of the day, once we factor in sort of all of the capital funding that you received and how they were utilized for those projects, you come to a total surplus of $3.9 million, compared with a budgeted of 5.5 and a prior year of $4.1 million deficit. Now, I should point out in the prior year, that deficit is really offset by, or really pushed down because you had an $8 million transfer as you guys transferred that Malroy drain over to the town of Coaldale. And so again, that's part of the reason for that significant loss in the prior year. So that is a reflection of your statement of operations. Just to break down the accumulated surplus, I wanted to, move to page 20 of your financial statements. So page 20 of your financial statements is your note disclosure related to your accumulated surplus. So I mentioned previously that you had an accumulated surplus of $142 million. Last year you had an accumulated surplus of $138 million. So that accumulated surplus, of that $142 million, $105 million is just your equity and your assets. So that is money that's already been spent, it's not available. It's just a reflection in sort of that equity portion that you have in your roads, buildings, equipment, those sort of things. Then there is just under $34 million in your, what we call your restricted surplus. So that's often what you refer to as your reserves. And so those are dollars that have been earmarked specifically for specific purposes, and you utilize them as you see fit as council, making motions in order to restrict dollars or pull dollars back out in order to fund some of your projects and programs. And then we get to your unrestricted of just over $3 million. So your unrestricted balance, those are funds that have that are available for future use and don't have any restriction on them. So that can be used for, current year deficits, certain programs, anything like that. So really, when we compare that $3 million out of the total of $142 million, the organization is really running relatively lean as a municipality, and you don't have, huge excesses that you're not sure what to do with and that sort of thing. And that's what this would indicate to a user of your financial statements. In addition to what we've talked about in the note disclosures, there's some additional breakdown. that provides some support as far as what makes up some of the numbers on the balance sheet as well as the income statement. There is some segmented disclosure as well that provides the revenues by program, so public works, utilities, those sorts of things. But I won't go through those in any specific detail with you today unless there's any questions. So I'll open up the floor for questions.
Any questions?
Okay. No one fell asleep, so that was positive, right? Usually when we talk, that's what happens.
Is that the first time you've never had a question?
No, we it happens quite often, yeah, for sure. So, okay. I will say that we did want to thank management. So that is Ann and Jen and their team. We had full access to all of the information that we needed during the course of the audit, and we really appreciate all of their hard work in order to make sure it was a successful audit year again this year. So thank you for that. Thank you to them.
Again, thank you for your work, because I know you guys do a good job. And,
Thank you. Okay.
thank you.
With that, then I will pass it
To Tori.
to Tori. There you go. Okay.
Thanks. Thank you, Phil. I think Phil kind of covered all the, from a high level, covered everything. Just a few things I guess I'll touch on. Just the recommendation that's before you today, that council approve the audited financial statements for the fiscal year ended December 31st, 2020, as presented by KPMG LLP. Background: the county's auditors, KPMG LLP, have audited and prepared the financial statements and have provided an unqualified opinion. The statements meet the requirements of Section 276 of the Municipal Government Act and are consistent with Canadian generally accepted accounting principles as recommended by the Public Sector Accounting Board of the Canadian Institute of Chartered Accountants. Just a couple of I guess, high-level notes from, I guess, what Phil went through with us today, and as well with the Audit Committee. Overall, I think the county is very fortunate to be in the position they're in through the COVID pandemic. Operations were able to be maintained at a very high level, and therefore there wasn't any huge impacts to the county financially, as we can see here. The deferral of some payment penalties did have an impact, but overall it was a minimal impact. One of the notes, as you'll see in the review as well, a continuing emphasis on the importance of cybersecurity. We need to continue to evolve and need to continue to be vigilant, accelerate our awareness, and continue to train and evolve. This isn't something, I think Phil said, you can't take your foot off the gas. This has to be something that it's not a one and done. We're constantly trying to keep that up, and very important moving forward as technology evolves and how we deal with funds and finances continues to evolve. It's very important that we're very vigilant on that front. And just as a closing note, just a thank you to Phil, Mark, and everyone else at KPMG. They were able to come to the building here and conduct the audit in-house, which was, I think, for both sides, very, very nice. Just a way to kind of close that gap and just makes everything so much easier. So thank you to Phil for being so accessible, and also just from the Audit Committee, thank you, and a thank you to Jen, and I know Phil touched on that as well. Jen and the staff here at the county. Every year that I've been on the Audit Committee, they always rave about how well-prepared staff is, and just like to pass along our thanks for that as well. So having said that, I would like to move the recommendation that County Council approve the audited financial statements for the fiscal year ended December 31st, 2020, as presented by KPMG LLP.
Thanks, Tori. Any questions? Any discussion? Seeing none, I'm going to call the question. Those in favor? Those opposed? Carried. Thanks again.
Excellent. All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
If it's okay, I might grab a couple of signatures.
Oh, absolutely not.
Absolutely not. Okay. I'll get out then. Okay.
Don't worry about it, that's fine.
And I do need some signatures for me. And one on here. Sorry.
How's that?
Mine didn't work.
All the other ones. Got that one good?
Nope. Doug looked at it.
he's fine, it's just like some.
Was that it? Yeah.
Please. Yes, for sure. Definitely. Yeah, I will do that. This is everything that we need, so we'll put this together and we will file your FIR for the end of the week. So that'll all be said and done then. You don't talk to me until next year. Perfect, there you go. Excellent. Thank you very much for your time, everyone.
Yep,
Really
thank you.
appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay. Let's go back to,
Bring Doug back up.
yeah. So we're done with policy 185. Let's go down to G.4.2, bylaw 21-006, record management bylaw. So do we need to rescind bylaw 973 first? But go ahead, Doug.
Okay. As mentioned, I'm here for the Records Management Bylaw 21-006. With the executive summary, the current bylaw 973 is from 1992. It is nearly 30 years old, outdated, and no longer relevant. Part of the background information, Council passed the Records Management Bylaw back in 1992, which had a retention schedule and guidelines for administrative staff to follow. This bylaw is obsolete. It does not reflect current or even recent technology. The new bylaw speaks to the overall management of records and an updated records management policy, which will be the document that will have the classification scheme and retention schedule based on current legislation. The alternatives, pros and cons, Council could consider the following when deliberating this decision. In support of the recommendation, the most current bylaw for records management is from 1992 and not reflective of current legislation. This bylaw does not provide administration with relevant terminology or best practices regarding retention schedules and classification schemes. The revised draft bylaw will provide a relevant foundation for administration to adhere to or to deny the recommendation. Bylaw 973 would remain in place but provide no legal support for administration to back up their recommendations for the retention and destruction of records. There is no cost to replace the bylaw. The reason for recommendations, again, bylaw 973 is obsolete and does not contain relevant information to guide administration in making decisions regarding records management and retention. So what we are recommending, Mr. Chairman, is that bylaw 21-006 be read a first, second, and third time. Thank you.
Go ahead, Steve.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just so I'm clear, these two go together, with the policy that we just rescinded and then the adopted policy 185, they basically go together with as a policy and a bylaw?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, to Councillor Campbell, yes, that is correct.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
So we do, first off, we better rescind bylaw 973. Does somebody care to make that motion? Claus?
I'll move to rescind bylaw 973.
Any discussion? Call the question. Those in favor? Those opposed? Carried. Now, is there any discussion about bylaw 21-006 or any questions? Seeing none, could we have somebody move for Steve?
I'll
move first reading of bylaw 21-006, the records management bylaw.
Any discussion? Call for the question. Those in favor? Those opposed? Carried. Second reading? Morris? Any discussion? Call for the question. Those in favor? Those opposed? Carried. Go to third. Ken? Those in favor? Those opposed? Carried. And third reading. Morris? Any discussion? Call for the question. Those in favor? Those opposed? Carried. Thanks, Doug.
Thank you.
Let's move down to request for sponsorship from the Alberta Northwest Territories Command for the Royal Canadian Legion. We've been doing this for quite a few years. Yeah.
Good morning. On March 18th, the attached email in your package with supporting documents were received from the Alberta Northwest Territory Command Royal Canadian Legion campaign requesting that Lethbridge County purchase a quarter-page advertisement in the amount of $570. In the past, we have done this, and the Military Service Recognition Book is in its 15th year of printing. This annual publication helps identify and recognize many veterans of Alberta and the Northwest Territories who have served their country. So the recommendation is that Lethbridge County purchase a quarter-page, full-color advertisement in the 15th Annual Military Service Recognition Book at a cost of $570, with funds coming from the Councillor's discretionary reserve.
Any questions or discussion? Morris?
Move that there, Mr. Chairman, that's something we always should be there for them. The ones we did in the past, we still do. So I'll move that.
Any discussion? Call the question. Those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. I think we're down to council update attendance. Oops.
Do we have, we can't get it up there. We used to be able to.
So on March the 3rd, I had a meeting with Ann, first EAO meeting. March the 5th was Mayors and Reeves. And Mayors and Reeves have been kind of bogged down lately by two items. One is policing, and the other one is coal mining. And neither one of them seem to be going away. At the last meeting, there was quite a bit of discussion over electronic voting, and a company made a presentation about that. It met with pretty mixed reviews. Everybody would like to take it back to their council before we send a letter off to the provincial government to have them consider looking at that. I think it's with the amount of hacking that's going on with people's software these days, I'm not sure it's quite the answer yet. It might not be quite secure enough for people to do from home as of yet. But anyway, I think that's a long ways away. But the coal mining thing is not dying, and neither is the policing costs. That'll be very present again at the next meeting because they want the RCMP to come and do a presentation. I think the cost is exorbitantly higher than what the government is really letting on to change over to provincial police force. And I don't know whether the benefits are there to doing that, but that's a decision that come later on, I assume. March the 8th, Ann and I had a meeting with Al Camre and Alberta Council. They were asking us to consider allowing them to do some lobbying for us, and Ann will be bringing back a report to a later meeting. And also on the 8th, again, we had a meeting with Ann and Ruth Goodwin, who is the mayor of Black Diamond or Turner Valley?
Diamond, she's
Black Diamond.
yeah.
So Black Diamond is amalgamating with Turner Valley. So we had a discussion with her about, you know, their pros and their cons and how they're doing it and why they're doing it and all that. I think probably should follow up with a report to council on that, I guess, a little better than just saying it here, because it's fairly complicated, and they have been in this process for about 5 years by the sounds of it. And I believe after the election in January, they are going to be amalgamated, and we'll have to have a new election for a new council.
And I think what they did in the past, because this has been ongoing for a few years with those two communities, they had a plebiscite the first time, then they had a plebiscite, they had 2 plebiscites, and this time they are just treating it as a business decision, and they are moving forward with, of course, public input, but that's how the 2 communities are laying it out. They have a committee, a joint committee from the 2 different councils, and they're moving forward together. And it's the first ever in Alberta anyway, joint application to the Ministry of Municipal Affairs where both applicants are on it. So it's I think it's a good model to look at.
Mm-hmm. And then on March 9th, we had the water workshop with council. On the 11th, we had the county council meeting. The 16th and 17th for the RMA's virtual spring convention. The 30th Municipal Development Plan workshop, number 2. The 31st, a meeting with Ann, and the 31st was also groundbreaking day for the exhibition sod turning for the new building. And any questions? Yeah, Klaus?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. On your meeting with Alchemire and Alberta Council, I know we're going to get another report in yet, but they want to lobby for us. Like, isn't RMA our lobby organization that we work with?
So basically, I think what they were kind of asking to do was sort of like when we had Jack Hayden and associates hired to do some lobbying work for us in Edmonton. They're kind of proposing that along the same lines, that they would meet with the ministers on behalf of the county, not through the RMA.
So they would work for every individual county that way then?
Yes.
Yeah. Currently, one of their clients is, I believe, the Alberta Irrigators. Was that what they mentioned,
Yes.
Lauren? That was one of their clients right now. So they do individual work and then groups as well.
Okay. And another question I had on the coal mining thing, wasn't the Alberta government going to go back to all the voters and see what their opinion was on the whole thing? Isn't that the process that they were going to take first before we're going to move on to anything else?
So they did go back to the policy of 1976, I believe it is.
76 or 4, I
So
can't remember.
now
yet.
they have opened up discussions on a new policy, and you had the opportunity to present your input to the committee or the group of people who are doing it, and they will be coming around and meeting with other individuals as time goes forward. So what the biggest concern is at Mayors and Reeves is the Alberta government has allocated another 200,000+ acres of irrigation water for southern Alberta. Where is that water coming from? If they're going to give water to the coal mine, where is the water coming for smaller municipalities, and especially like Pincher Creek? Because their water source is somewhat limited, so they're quite concerned about how much water they're going to get out of the deal. If the coal mine gets some and the irrigation gets some, what's left over for them? And the other big thing seems to be the amount of selenium that's in the water, or could potentially be put into the water by the practice of mining. Any other questions? Okay, let's move down to Tory.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. March 9th, water workshop with council. The 11th, county council meeting. The 16th and 17th of March, the RMA 2021 virtual spring convention. And the 30th, we met with administration and staff regarding the municipal development plan, and it was our second workshop on that. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for Tori? Seeing none, let's move down to Division 3. Bob?
Okay, March 9th, water workshop with council. March 11th, Lethbridge County Council meeting. March 16th and 17th, RMA 2021 virtual spring convention. And the 30th, municipal development plan, county council workshop number 2. Thank you.
Any questions for Bob? Seeing none, let's move down to Division 4. Ken?
Yeah, water, workshop on the 9th, 11th, so 16, 17 is at 2 p.m. And 30th is the workshop for the council. And little bit that I want to know is, I think when last year, when they took the, or changed the, coal mining, they took it out and stuff like that, and then when they put it back, they didn't actually put it in here, but my understanding is at the end of April, the first one is probably going to become, so I don't know, I'm just anybody else.
Do you mean the first people who are doing exploration get a permit? Is that what you mean, or?
No, they took the, allowed them to come in,
Right?
and then they were, I don't know how long they took it out. Well, when did they put it back in?
Oh,
I see.
September?
no, they put it back in on,
Yeah,
March the 6th.
Oh, March 6th.
Yeah.
Okay, so, for some reason, that, one coal, when they put it in there, they never, took up, or my understanding is that they, didn't, allow whatever it is, but there's something at the end of April that, could be for the year or whatever.
So this committee they struck to bring back the recommendations for a new policy has till the end, either September or October, I can't remember which it is, to present their paper to the minister. So in the meantime, there are a few companies that did have a permit for exploration, which are allowed to continue, but some weren't allowed to continue, and I don't know the difference between them. And the tent project can continue because it was in an existing mine. However, there are some challenges being issued to that because at more than 5,000 or more tons per day of production, you require a federal permit. So their production is only 4,935 tons per day. But some days it could be over 5,000, so it may be looked at. That, I don't know much more other than that. Yeah, they do take the average.
Can I just ask a clarification, Ken? Are you saying that when they took the policy out from the 70s and put it back in, there was some changes? Is that what you were asking?
Yeah, that, when they took it out, then I think there's some of the coal people had
Well, I think that is in reference to the tent project or tent mining.
Okay, tent mining.
And that's because they can start, I believe they can start mining on May the 1st.
Oh, okay. We'll check.
But they already had an existing permit to do so. So they didn't get rescinded on,
Well, maybe that's the one.
yeah.
Okay.
So the end of April, they can.
That's my understanding now. Who knows whether they'll change their mind again or not. I don't know.
We'll keep up on the latest developments.
Yeah, we should know more probably fairly soon.
Yeah.
Okay. Division 5, Steve.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. March 3rd, Exhibition Park Board meeting. March 9th, Water Workshop. March 11th, had County Council meeting. 16th and 17th, the RMA 2021 Virtual Spring Convention. 23rd, at Community Futures Board meeting. 30th, the Municipal Development Plan Workshop. And the 31st, Exhibition Park groundbreaking ceremony, which was kind of an exciting first official step to the new build. And just a little update on Community Futures in the last year. The federal government funneled money through to the Community Futures for the COVID relief called the Regional Relief and Recovery Fund. So the local Community Futures has administered 107 loans out of there worth $3.3 million. And those were those $40,000 business loans to businesses, and just 75% of that had to be repaid.
Any questions for Steve? So Steve, I assume that Ag Expo is a no-go this year, and what about the Home and Garden? Is it you know?
They were both canceled, and there's kind of a virtual website for each. So most businesses, for a small fee, there would be links to their websites and activities and stuff. So yeah, for now they're canceled, and just for the timing, those were the kind of the latest dates to do them anyway, was March, April kind of thing anyway. So as we get through summer, hopefully the next events in the fall will be able to continue, or see what happens, I guess.
So do you know, just sorry to follow up again a little more, Calgary Stampede is talking about going ahead with the exhibition this year. Do you think that Lethbridge is thinking about that, or?
For Whoop Up Days?
Yeah.
There's still time. The drop dead date hasn't hit yet, so hopefully something can happen. I mean, at the last minute last year, there was some small events, or more of the food pickup things, but for this summer there is going to, I can't remember what it was called, but there's going to be a barbecue event, like a competition on site there. So, and I'm sure that would be able to go with restrictions too. So if they can kind of come up with certain events like that, then make a little money that way.
Good, thank you. Any other questions? Let's go down to Division 6, Klaus.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. March 9th, we had the water workshop with council. March 11th, we had a Lethbridge County meeting. 16 and 17, we had the RMA Spring Convention. 17th had Economic Development Lethbridge, and that was the AGM. And the 26th, we had a SAWA board meeting in Strathmore. And March 30th, we had the Municipal Development Plan County Workshop #2. And maybe I want to elaborate a little bit on the SAWA project. We made a motion to have the project lead, and that's the Paul Ryan, to work with HDR to find out, to get an expression of interest, to see who wants to go with us, because there was, it seems like the provincial government were not moving with them to get any funding for the whole project itself, and we're talking about $500 million. And there were some voices that went up, let's try the federal government. We rejected that. We said, we're living in Alberta here, and we know that the Liberal government that we have right now doesn't even recognize the Western Canada. And that's maybe a little harsh, but I mean, that's basically the way our Prime Minister looks at the whole situation. And so we rejected that one, and that's why we're going to go with the expression of interest. And according to our Paul Ryan has mentioned over and over that the people were lined up to come and invest in this project, that they're very interested. So we'll see what comes out of this one. And next week we have another virtual meeting, so we'll see where this leads us, because we said too, the election is coming on. We're going to have quite a few new board members, because there's quite a few that have indicated already that they will not be running for another election. So it's gonna die down if we don't do anything right now. All our effort and everything is going to be done for nothing. And we all know that the results that we wanted, and I think we're coming really close, that the end result is that we get this thing up and running, and it doesn't matter how, because we know it's the right thing to do, to come up with the way to have this project built. And I think if we stall this of trying to do more ourselves, then this is not going to go anywhere. We're as far as we can go as a board, and now something else has to happen, and that's why we need some outside investment coming in, people interested, and get things moving before October of this year.
Ann?
When you say an expression of interest, specifically what's that for? To build it, or just to raise funds, or what are the parameters of the expression of interest?
That is to get an expression of interest of people interested to investing their money, taking over the project that we have built so far with the life cycle analysis and the whole works. So, the way I would look at it is that we would probably either work with them together, or it would be that they would take it over and we would get our money for the life cycle analysis and everything that we've done with the Penaway Institute, and that we would get our money back. But I think the main thing is that that this project goes ahead sooner than later, because if we wait for the next election, it's probably going to be dead.
Okay, can I?
Yeah.
further? Yeah. So sort of like see whether anybody's interested in a public-private or just a private, to see what's out there.
Whatever is there.
Okay, thank you.
We'll probably hear more in the next 1 or 2 months, because we said we got to move quickly, because before we know it, it's going to be October.
Okay, and it's going to close, you'll know after next
Yeah,
week.
yeah.
You'll have a better idea.
Because
Okay.
Ben Armstrong is not coming back. The mayor of Coaldale has indicated that he's not running anymore, and there's another 2 or 3 that are not going to be back. So
Ken?
How much money have you got?
for what?
How much money do you have in your, I guess, have you got $1 million or whatever?
You mean to start building the project?
Yeah.
And no, we don't have that money to start building the project. All we did was have funds together from all the counties that participated and everything like that to move to where we are today.
Okay, so you've got funds coming from the other councils?
That is the same. We all pay our dues, I think it's 53 cents a member that we pay. So I think it's for the county of Lethbridge, it's about $5,300 that we pay. And there's another 40 or whatever that also are participating in and are on the board.
Steve?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would hope that they go down the road of partnering with private industry with SEWA. I don't think there's anything there to sell. There's so many big companies out there that are doing this kind of stuff. They've done all the research. I don't think there's anything really valuable to sell, in my opinion.
Yeah, no, well, You know, we did the whole life cycle analysis, of course, and that was a very expensive project, $1 million something, or maybe $2 million, I don't know exactly the numbers. But we are looking at, you know, the options that we have. Like the one that we would like the most was partner with private industry to move this on, because, well, we've gone that far that the environmental, everything is done. And I think that was one of the biggest ones takes years before you get all these things done. And I think that we're at the point that we're just about shovel ready if we get the money. So we're looking at an investor that wants to come in, and we'd prefer the partnering together. Unless this doesn't work, we have to look at other solutions.
Cory?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm not sure if you have the answer, Claus, but I'll ask the question anyways. Lately, I've been seeing a lot of articles where in Europe, where this is already established, there's, you know, as there always is with stuff like this, there's contention between building new ones and do we keep the ones running, and what are the environmental impacts? Has there been a clear indication here for the site that's been approved? Would the permitting and all that process, is there still hurdles to clear on that front? Or, like you say, if a partner is found, if funding was found, is it a foregone conclusion that this can move forward, or is there still those regulatory and environmental hurdles to clear yet?
No, all the environmental and the regulatory hurdles, we all went through that, and that's why this whole project took over 10 years. Right, we're ready. Like say, if we get the person in that wants to invest and partner with us, or whatever is going to happen with that, that's why we're putting out an expression of interest. But there's no hurdles to go through anymore, and that's kind of the nice part. That you know, this was all done, and this usually takes time because in BC there's one, and in Ontario there's one. In Europe there's quite a few. So, and that's why we're working with HDR, the lawyers from Ontario, because they were part of doing the one in Ontario, and that one's up and running. And well, the moment that they start, it was too small already. So, like I said, I think I mentioned before, we're the capacity of 300,000 tons a year, and the savings on environmental, on greenhouse gases is 7 million tons. So this is like the environmental, everything is done except for we need the money, and we'd have to go ahead. So, like we said, we decided we got to move on, and we can't go try to get funds and try to do it ourselves, because that's you know, the time consuming, and we know that it's a bad time right now that to be able to get some money from any government.
Thank you. Any other questions? Morris?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. To Claus, you know, I hear you loud and clear, you saying, you know, we got to move on. However, in the circle, is there some of them down there maybe saying, let's throw in the towel, and it is just, because this has been going on for 10 or 12 years now, and it's still nothing fundamentally set that it looks like it's a go-ahead. Like, once the go-aheads are there, how many municipalities are going to participate when they find out, you know, what the tipping fees and all of that is going to be, you know? So I'm sure you guys discussed that, and is there some of them that are getting kind of reluctant maybe?
No, we're at the point that we're ready to go, Morris. But like I said, the funding has to be in place, and for the rest, and then the tipping fees. What we figured out, the tipping fees would be around $50–60 versus what we're paying with the Lethbridge County right now, and we're going to be up to next year. And I think Tori, I think we're going to be at $125 for tipping fees. So it's going to be much cheaper. But like I said, then it's going to be built. We have the site, we have everything done. We even have a second site that would qualify if the first site wouldn't. So and there's nobody that wants to back out. We're all, it's a go. So it just depends on the financial situation that we need to get the shovel in the ground. And that's why we said, we got to move now, we got everything done. We were rejected last time for the provincial government, the money that we wanted there, and we said, now we got to move on in order to have this project up and running.
So Claus, just to follow up a little bit on that, when you talked about looking for a private investor, if somebody was to come in and say, we'll take it over, but we want to run it and do it, what do you see as the influence? Like, would they charge more money? Would they be more like the tipping fees are paying now to the city of Lethbridge, or have you had any input on or idea from that cost-wise?
Yeah, and that's what we're kind of working on. We're going to see what the kind of the interest that's going to be there. We're going to have negotiate, and we're going to talk with them and see where we're going to be going with that. Because I mean, there is no like direct concrete set prices yet for tipping fees and everything like that. Mm-hmm. But that is in the life cycle analysis that we did at the time, and those were the numbers that came out of that one. So this is what we have to prove for a private investor that would come in, and he would see those numbers that we had, because even the government and even the former government, the environment minister, they were impressed with the numbers that we had from the Pinama Institute, and that's why we went that route with that. And like we said, we're at this stage, all the work is done, all the regulations, everything is clear, but we're ready for shovel in the ground.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Morris, Division 7.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. March the 9th, Water Workshop with Council. March 11th, Lethbridge County Council meeting. March the 16th, RMA 2021 Virtual Convention. March the 7th, RMA Virtual Convention. March the 30th, Municipal Development Plan County Council Workshop number 2.
Any questions for Division 7? Seeing none, could we have a motion to accept for information? Morris? All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. I think we're done except for the in-camera, so could we have a motion to move into camera? Claus?